A courtroom hushed waiting. A mother-in-law, Beatrice Davenport, smirked from the witness stand, having just painted her daughter-in-law, Irina, as a gold-digging and unstable liar. Beatrice was openly protecting her son's mistress, Chloe, and doing everything in her power to ensure Irina would walk away from the divorce with absolutely nothing. But Irina had a secret. She sat behind her lawyer, her hands steady on her lap, where she could feel the outline of a single black hard drive. She watched her lawyer, Mr. Henderson, stand up. He didn't just have evidence of an affair, he had proof of a conspiracy so dark it would dismantle an entire powerful family. The proof was about to be shown, and the password was Reginald. The first lie Irina Davenport told herself was that the chill in the house was just the marble. Their home in the Willow Creek Equestrian Estates was a monument to minimalist wealth, all glass, chrome, and white stone. It was a house featured in magazines, a house that felt less like a home and more like a high-end corporate lobby. Irina, a brilliant graphic designer, had tried to warm it up. She'd added velvet throws, richly textured rugs, and vibrant abstract art that seemed to shout in the echoing silence. Her husband Marcus hadn't noticed. Or if he did, he didn't care. Marcus Davenport was a man sculpted by expectation. As the only son of the formidable Beatrice Davenport, he was a senior partner at Grant Thornton Advisory, looked the part and said all the right things. He had been charming, attentive, and passionate when they first met. Irina, then a rising star at her design firm, had been swept away. His proposal on the Ponte Vecchio in Florence, the 3-carat Tiffany ring, the 300-guest wedding, it had been a fairy tale. Now, 4 years later, the fairy tale was bleeding out on the cold imported marble floor. The distance had started subtly. Marcus was working late, market volatility, he'd explained, waving a dismissive hand. He'd come home smelling not of his usual Tom Ford cologne, but of something floral and sweet. Irina recognized it instantly. Joe Malone's peony and blush suede. It was not a scent she ever wore. Then there were the calls. He'd take them on the terrace, his voice a low, urgent murmur. When he came back inside, he'd be agitated, his eyes sliding past her. Just a difficult client, he'd mutter, loosening the Hermes tie she had bought him. But the true center of the cold front was, as always, Beatrice. Beatrice Davenport was a woman who didn't walk. She glided. Clad in her uniform of St. John knit suits and carrying a severe Launer handbag, she was the queen of Willow Creek society. From the moment Marcus introduced Irina, Beatrice had treated her with a suffocating, polite disdain. A graphic designer, Beatrice had mused at their first meeting, looking at Irina's portfolio as if it were a child's crayon drawing. How creative. To Beatrice, Irina was a disruption. She was not old money. She had a career, not a list of charities. She had opinions, not just an obedience to protocol. "Irina, darling," Beatrice said to her just last week at a tense Sunday brunch, "you must understand Marcus is a man with responsibilities. This market won't wait for him to dabble." Dabble was the word she used to describe the time Marcus had suggested a weekend trip for their anniversary. Beatrice had vetoed it by manufacturing a family crisis involving a distant cousin. Irina had tried to talk to Marcus about his mother's suffocating influence. "Marcus, she can't just dictate our entire schedule," Irina had pleaded. "She's just protective, Irina," Marcus replied, scrolling through his phone. "It's how she shows love. You just have to get used to it." But Irina was beginning to suspect protective was just a euphemism for controlling. And as Marcus grew more distant, Beatrice, in a bizarre twist, seemed to grow happier. She was humming at that last brunch, a small, tight smile on her face as she watched Irina push food around her plate, her appetite lost to the creeping dread in her stomach. The dread finally crystallized on a Tuesday. Marcus had called, his voice clipped. "Going to be an all-nighter, sweetheart. We're restructuring the flagship fund. Don't wait up." Irina said, "Okay, I love you." The line clicked dead before he could say it back. She sat in the vast, silent living room. The art on the walls felt like a mockery. She had just finished a major rebranding project for a new client, Aura Cosmetics, and she should have been celebrating. Instead, she was staring at the Garmin watch she'd synced with Marcus's phone for their marathon training he'd abandoned 3 months ago. She tapped the screen. The Find My app pinged. He wasn't at Grant Thornton Advisory in the financial district. His location dot was pulsing steadily in the trendy upscale neighborhood of the Heights. Specifically, it was pulsing over a small, incredibly expensive restaurant called the Gilded Sparrow. Irina knew it. You couldn't get a reservation for months. It was intimate, dark, and famous for its exclusivity. It was not a place you took a client for an all-nighter restructuring. It was a place you took a lover. Irina stood up. The marble floor was freezing under her feet, but she didn't feel it. She felt a sudden burning heat. She grabbed her keys, a Bottega Veneta briefcase for her laptop, and walked out of the house. She wasn't going to the Gilded Sparrow to make a scene. She was going to her office. She needed to think. But first she needed proof. Not of the affair she already knew. She needed to understand why the man she married had become a stranger. She activated the screen recorder on her laptop, opened her shared cloud accounts, and started to dig. She had a feeling this wasn't just about a broken heart. It was about to be a war. The evidence was pathetic in its mundanity. Irina sat in her sleek modern office, the glow of her dual monitors illuminating the tears she refused to let fall. She had dug through shared credit card statements, filtering by user. Marcus's expenses were a neon red trail of betrayal. There were the Joe Malone perfume purchases, the La Perla lingerie receipts in a size 6, not Irina's size 2. There were dozens of Uber rides to and from an apartment in the Heights, always between 2:00 p.m. and 4:00 p.m. And then the reservations. The Gilded Sparrow booked under a corporate card, but also Anya's Le Fantôme, the Oak Room. Irina meticulously saved every PDF. She took screenshots. She built a folder, password protected it, and saved it to an external drive. But the real shock came when she cross-referenced the dates. The most expensive gifts, the most lavish dinners, all coincided with days Irina was out of town for work, or when Beatrice had required Marcus's presence at some function. A cold realization settled over her. His mother had been his alibi. She drove home as the sun was rising, her mind sharp and clear. When she entered their pristine white bedroom, Marcus was just getting in, feigning a yawn and loosening his tie. "Morning," he said, startled. "You're up early. You smell like peonies," Irina said, her voice flat. Marcus froze. "What, Irina? I'm exhausted. It was a brutal night." "I'll bet." She turned from her dresser to face him. "The Gilded Sparrow. Is the Wagyu beef as good as they say? And who is she, Marcus? The size 6 you bought the La Perla for?" The color drained from his face. He was a cornered animal, and his first instinct was not remorse but anger. "You've been spying on me, going through my things." "My God, Irina, you're paranoid." "Am I?" Irina's voice was dangerously calm. "Or am I just thorough? I have the receipts, Marcus. The Ubers. The hotel day rates at the peninsula. So you have exactly one chance to tell me the truth. Who is she?" Marcus sank onto the edge of their restoration hardware bed. The fight went out of him, replaced by a sullen petulance. "Her name is Chloe. It just happened, Irina. We connected." "You connected?" Irina laughed, a bitter, sharp sound. "You connected over my money at restaurants I can't get into while your mother covered for you. Leave my mother out of this." He snapped, his bravado returning. "Oh, I can't," Irina said. "She's been your wingman. How proud she must be." She walked to the closet and pulled out a suitcase. "I want a divorce, Marcus." This finally seemed to land. Panic flared in his eyes. "Irina, wait. Don't be so dramatic. It's a mistake. We can go to therapy. Don't throw this all away. You threw this away when you bought lingerie for another woman, Marcus. You threw it away when you lied to my face every single day." She packed her essentials, her laptop, her hard drives, her clothes. "My lawyer will be in touch." She left him standing in the cold white bedroom, a perfectly curated museum of a life that had been a complete lie. Irina checked into a suite at the Four Seasons and called the best divorce attorney in the city. Mr. Henderson, a man known for his surgical precision. But the true twist, the one that turned her grief into a cold, hard fury, came 3 days later. Irina had hired a private investigator, a no-nonsense man named Frank, to get photos of Marcus and Chloe. Not for the divorce, which was no fault, but for her own understanding. Frank called her. "You're not going to believe this, Mrs. Davenport," he said, his voice gravelly. "I got your husband and the girlfriend. But that's not the shot you're going to care about." He emailed her the file. The first few photos were as expected: Marcus and a young, stunningly beautiful blonde Chloe kissing passionately outside his apartment building. But the last 3 photos were the ones that made Irina's blood run cold. They were taken in broad daylight at an outdoor cafe. It was Chloe, the mistress, and sitting across from her smiling was Beatrice Davenport. Beatrice was leaning forward, her posture animated. She was laughing. In the final shot, Beatrice was sliding a thick white envelope across the table to Chloe. Chloe took it, her own smile bright and triumphant. This wasn't just a mother covering for her son. This was an alliance. The mother-in-law wasn't just aware of the mistress. She was funding her. She was protecting her. Irina stared at the image, the smiling faces of the 2 women who were systematically destroying her life. "Frank," Irina said into the phone, her voice shaking with a new terrifying resolve. "Change of plans. Forget Marcus and the girl. I want everything you have on Beatrice." The divorce proceedings began, and they were not a civilized separation. They were a blitzkrieg. It became immediately clear that Beatrice was the general. Marcus was just a pawn. Irina was the target. Within 48 hours, Irina was served with a mountain of paperwork. Marcus, or rather Beatrice's legal team from the notoriously aggressive firm of Hartwell and Sneed, had filed first. They weren't just agreeing to a divorce, they were countersuing. They alleged gross financial misconduct on Irina's part. They claimed she was the one who was unstable, a profligate spender who had put the family in financial jeopardy. They included doctored statements, lists of her business expenses for Aura Cosmetics, which her client paid for, framed as personal frivolous sprees. Then came the injunction. They moved to freeze their joint assets, claiming Irina was a flight risk and was liquidating marital property. This was a lie. Irina had only moved her personal clothing and her work equipment, but the motion was granted temporarily. Irina, the CEO of her own successful design firm, suddenly found her corporate cards declined. Her personal accounts, which were linked to the joint account, were frozen solid. "It's a power play," Mr. Henderson, her lawyer, explained in his calm, measured tone. They were in his mahogany-paneled office. "They're trying to bleed you dry, Irina, to make you desperate. They want you to settle for pennies just to make this stop." "She won't stop," Irina said, her hands clenched. "Beatrice, this is all her. Marcus isn't smart enough to be this cruel." "Then we need to be smarter," Henderson said. "The deposition is in 2 weeks. Be prepared. They will try to break you." The deposition was held in a sterile conference room at Hartwell and Sneed. On one side sat Irina and Mr. Henderson. On the other, Marcus, his smug lawyer, and Beatrice, who was not legally required to be there, but attended as a moral support. Her steely gaze never leaving Irina. Chloe, the mistress, was also there. Irina was stunned. Why was she here? The opposing counsel, a shark named Barlow, explained. "Ms. Chloe Vance is here to provide testimony regarding Mr. Davenport's state of mind and the abuse he suffered at the hands of my client's wife." Irina felt the room tilt. Abuse. For the next 6 hours, Irina listened as her life was rewritten into a gothic horror. Chloe Vance, coached to perfection, took the stand first. She wept, dabbing her eyes. She spoke of how Marcus would come to her, broken, terrified of his wife's violent mood swings and insane jealousy. Beatrice was next. Her testimony was a masterpiece of aristocratic slander. "Irina was never stable," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. I was worried from the start. The spending? My goodness. She saw Marcus as a bank account. She bought, well, just look at her. Bottega Veneta, Armani, all on my son's dime. When he finally tried to rein her in, she became erratic. Marcus's testimony was the most pathetic. He parroted his mother's words, his eyes fixed on the table. I just wanted to make her happy. But it was never enough. I sought comfort with Chloe because Irina had grown so cold. Irina sat through it all, her expression a mask of ice. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just took notes. She noted how Chloe and Beatrice's stories were identical down to the specific and false dates of Irina's supposed outbursts. She noted how Chloe, when asked where she lived, gave the address of an expensive condo, and when asked who paid for it, Beatrice's lawyer interjected, "Irrelevant. Miss Vance is financially independent." How? Irina's lawyer pushed. What is your occupation, Miss Vance? Chloe smiled. I'm a consultant. A consultant for whom? Objection, badgering the witness. It was a performance, a perfectly rehearsed play, and Irina was the villain. After the deposition, Irina felt hollowed out. They were trying to build a case that she was an unfit, unstable gold digger. In a no-fault state, this was unusual. Why were they fighting so hard? They're not just trying to win the divorce, Irina, Henderson said, packing his briefcase. They're trying to annihilate you, to ruin your reputation. This is scorched earth. I've never seen a mother-in-law go to these lengths to protect a mistress. It doesn't add up. That night, Irina sat in her hotel room staring at the picture Frank had taken Beatrice and Chloe, laughing, passing the envelope. You're right, Mr. Henderson, she whispered to the empty room. It doesn't add up. She thought about the identical testimonies. The way Beatrice looked at Chloe, not with the disdain one might expect, but with camaraderie. Like partners. Partners. Irina's blood ran cold. She opened her laptop and called her PI Frank. Frank, I have a new target and a name, Chloe Vance. I want to know who she is, where she came from, and who her consulting clients are. I want to know who her family is, and I want to know the same thing about Beatrice. Everything. Her bank, her broker, her private portfolio. Especially her private portfolio. Frank was good. He was ex-Mossad, or so the rumor went, and he moved through the digital and physical worlds like a ghost. But Beatrice Davenport was a fortress. Your mother-in-law is clean. Frank reported back a week later, frustration in his voice. Too clean. Her financials are a bore. She's got a standard portfolio with Morgan Stanley, a checking account, and her charity work. She's a pillar of the community. Nothing. Irina frowned. That's impossible, Frank. This woman is a snake. Keep digging. What about Chloe Vance? That's where it gets interesting, Frank said. Chloe Vance didn't exist 2 years ago, not under that name. She's from, well, everywhere. A few years in Miami, a stint in Vegas. No criminal record, but she's slippery. Her condo is leased by a shell corporation, Aegean Holdings LLC. The corporation was registered 6 months ago in Delaware. Can't see who owns it. Aegean Holdings, Irina repeated, writing it down. What about Beatrice's private portfolio? She mentioned it, Frank asked. All the time, Irina said, her mind racing back. She was smug about it. She said Marcus was a safe investor, but she preferred her private advisor, a Mr. Graves, who knew how to take real risks. There is no Mr. Graves registered with FINRA, Frank said flatly. At least not one connected to her. It's a dead end. Irina hung up, frustrated. She was being stonewalled by a wall of perfectly legal, perfectly opaque wealth. She paced her hotel suite, the legal bills piling up. Henderson was holding them off, but Irina's own funds were almost gone. She was going to lose. She was going to be painted as a lunatic and left with nothing. She stopped. Mr. Graves. She thought back to every family event, every gala, every charity ball. Beatrice was always talking to someone. She closed her eyes trying to visualize. The Metropolitan Ball 2 years ago. Beatrice dripping in Harry Winston diamonds. She was in a corner in a heated discussion with a man. Not her husband who had been dead for a decade. Not Marcus. A man Irina didn't recognize. He was silver-haired, impeccably dressed in a Brioni tuxedo. Irina had passed them and Beatrice had clutched the man's arm laughing and said, "Oh, Arthur, you are a devil." Arthur, not Mr. Graves. Irina grabbed her laptop. She had digitized all their old family photos for a 60th birthday video for Beatrice, a project Beatrice had criticized her for saying the font was common. She found the album. There, the gala. She zoomed in. The man was in the background, but his name tag was just visible. Arthur Vance. Vance. Irina felt the floor drop out from under her. Chloe Vance. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Frank, it's me. I have a new name for you. Arthur Vance. Find out everything about his connection to Beatrice Davenport, and find out if he has a daughter named Chloe." While Frank did his work, Irina focused on Beatrice. If Mr. Graves was a lie, then the private portfolio was too. Irina knew Beatrice. Beatrice was sentimental only about a few things: her money, her power, and a long-dead poodle named Reginald. Irina had a flash of memory: Beatrice's home office. A heavy mahogany desk. On it, a small black fireproof safe. Not a digital one, but one with a combination lock. Irina had once asked what was in it. "Just memories, dear," Beatrice had sneered. "Something your generation wouldn't understand." Irina had watched her open it once. Her fingers had flicked the dial. Right, left, right. It was a fast practiced motion. Irina, with her designer's eye for detail, had noticed the numbers she'd paused on. 24, 40, 12. A birthday. An anniversary. Number. Irina was being deposed, bled dry. She needed to get into that house. The house. The Willow Creek estate. It was marital property, and it was being sold as per the injunction. The real estate agent was holding an agents-only open house the next day. Irina put on her largest Chanel sunglasses, wrapped her hair in a Hermes scarf, and borrowed her assistant's Toyota Corolla. She looked like a bored, wealthy housewife, the perfect disguise. She walked into the open house, grabbed a brochure, and nodded at the agent. While the agents fawned over the kitchen's wolf range and the Sub-Zero refrigerators, Irina slipped into the study. The safe was still there. She knelt. Her fingers, slick with sweat, fumbled on the dial. Right to 24, left past 24 to 40, right to 12. Click. She pulled the small, heavy door open. Inside there were no memories, no love letters, no jewels, just a single black Seagate portable hard drive. Irina's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. She didn't know what it was, but this was Beatrice's entire secret world. She slipped it into her pocket, walked calmly out of the study, and left the open house. She got back to her hotel, her hands shaking so badly she could barely plug the drive into her laptop. Password required. Irina's heart sank. Of course. She tried Beatrice. Marcus. 244012. Willow Creek. Access denied. Access denied. Access denied. She was about to be locked out. She took a deep breath. What did Beatrice really love? What was she really sentimental about? Her long-dead, taxidermied in her mind poodle. Irina typed, "Reginald, access granted." The hard drive was a Pandora's box of high-level financial crime. Irina, armed with a fresh pot of coffee and her burning rage, clicked through the folders. They were meticulously organized. Folder 1. Shells. Inside were subfolders. Aegean Holdings. Naxos Properties. Spartan Trust. Each contained incorporation documents from Delaware, the Cayman Islands, and Switzerland. Folder 2, Transfers. This was a series of spreadsheets tracking millions of dollars. Irina watched in horror as she saw what Beatrice had done. For years she had been siphoning money from the Davenport family trust, the trust Marcus was supposed to inherit, the trust Irina's prenup had partially tied her to as a marital asset. Beatrice had been moving it piece by piece into her offshore shells. She wasn't just a controlling mother-in-law, she was an embezzler. She was stealing her own son's inheritance. Folder 3. AV Comms. This was the payload. It was a password-protected email archive. Irina tried Reginald again. Access denied. She tried Arthur Vance. Access granted. It was years of correspondence between Beatrice Davenport and Arthur Vance, and it laid the entire conspiracy bare. Arthur Vance, as Frank had just confirmed in an email, was a disgraced former wealth manager. He was also, as Irina now saw from the emails, Beatrice's lover and financial partner. And yes, he was Chloe's father. The plan was audacious in its cruelty. Beatrice and Arthur had been partners for a decade. They had built their offshore empire in secret. But they had a problem. The bulk of the Davenport money was locked in the family trust, which Marcus and Irina's marriage had made more complicated. Irina's prenup had been ironclad. It stipulated that if Marcus was unfaithful, Irina would get a massive settlement tying up the trust for years. But if Irina could be proven to be at fault, financially irresponsible, unstable, or if she filed for divorce first without a clear infidelity clause, Beatrice and her lawyers believed they could invalidate the prenup, liquidate the marital assets like the Willow Creek house, and seize control. They needed a way to break up the marriage, blame Irina, and get their hands on the cash. So they used their own daughter. Irina read her skin crawling as Beatrice and Arthur planned the affair. Email from Arthur, 2 years ago. B. Chloe is on board. She's smart. She understands the stakes. She'll have him wrapped around her finger in a month. Email from Beatrice. Excellent. I've booked her a condo. Aegean Holdings will cover it. Make sure she understands the rules. No emotion. This is a job. The plan was to have Chloe seduce Marcus, then have Beatrice discover the affair and pressure Marcus to leave Irina. But Marcus, they complained in their emails, was weak. He wouldn't pull the trigger. Email from Beatrice. He's still with her. He's a coward. We need to force his hand. We need to force her hand. Irina, she's the strong one. We need her to file for divorce. We'll set the stage. That's when the all-nighters started. The perfume, the restaurant reservations. It was all a performance orchestrated by Beatrice designed to be discovered. They wanted Irina to find out. And the deposition. The slander. The lies about Irina being unstable. It was all part 2. They needed to paint Irina as the crazy wife, so that when she inevitably found out about the affair and filed for divorce, they could argue she was unstable, void the prenup, and seize the assets. Chloe and Beatrice's identical testimonies were not a mistake. They were rehearsed based on a script Arthur and Beatrice had written. Irina was a pawn. Marcus was a pawn. Chloe was a willing co-conspirator in her own father's scheme to defraud a family. Irina scrolled to the most recent file. It was a PDF. A signed agreement between Beatrice Davenport, Arthur Vance, and Chloe Vance. It detailed the split. Once the divorce was final and the assets liquidated, Beatrice and Arthur would each take 40%. Chloe Vance would get 20%, a multi-million-dollar consulting fee, for successfully destroying Irina's marriage. Irina saved a copy of the entire drive. She emailed it to Mr. Henderson. She emailed it to a secure Proton Mail account. She made 3 physical copies on SanDisk USBs. Then she showered, put on her most severe, elegant black Armani suit, and met Mr. Henderson. Good God, Irina, was all he said, his face pale as he looked up from his own laptop. They didn't just want a divorce. Irina said, her voice like steel. They wanted to ruin me. They wanted me to look like a gold-digging crazy woman so they could rob their own son blind. Henderson's pallor was replaced by a slow, predatory smile, a smile Irina had never seen on him. "Irina," he said, "they've given us a nuclear bomb. The final hearing is tomorrow. Judge Miller is presiding. She has no patience for this kind of theater. Tomorrow you don't say a word. Just let me work." "One condition," Irina said. "She has to be on the stand. Beatrice. I want her under oath when this all comes out." "That," Henderson said, "is already the plan." The courtroom was small, sterile, and smelled of stale coffee and floor wax. It was the last place Irina ever expected to be fighting for her life. Judge Miller was a stern woman with sharp eyes who looked like she'd heard every lie imaginable. Marcus, Irina saw, looked terrible. He was pale, drawn, and kept glancing at his mother for reassurance. Beatrice, by contrast, was a vision of smug maternal strength. She wore a severe navy suit, her hair in a perfect chignon. She looked at Irina with open contempt. Chloe Vance was in the gallery, sitting right behind Marcus, looking for all the world like the supportive, concerned new partner. Barlow, their lawyer, was wrapping up his case. "And so, Your Honor, as you can see from the testimony, Mrs. Davenport's erratic behavior and profligate spending are the sole cause of this marital breakdown. We ask that the prenuptial agreement be set aside given her clear financial malfeasance, and that the marital assets be placed under the control of a conservator, namely my client's mother, Mrs. Beatrice Davenport, who has managed the family's finances for decades." Managed them right into her own pocket, Irina thought. "Mr. Henderson," the judge said, "your witness." "Thank you, Your Honor," Henderson said, standing. "The defense calls Beatrice Davenport to the stand." A flicker of surprise. Beatrice had already given her deposition. This was unusual. Barlow objected. "Your Honor, Mrs. Davenport has provided extensive testimony." "And yet I find I have a few more questions," Henderson said smoothly. "Unless Mrs. Davenport is worried." Beatrice stood a mask of offended dignity. "I have nothing to hide, Mr. Henderson. I will gladly testify for the good of my son." She walked to the stand, was sworn in, and settled herself, arranging her suit jacket. She was the queen on her throne. Henderson started softly. "Mrs. Davenport, you testified in your deposition that you believe Irina, your daughter-in-law, is unstable, correct?" "That is correct. She is emotionally volatile, prone to fantasies. And you testified that she is fiscally irresponsible." "Wildly," Beatrice said with a delicate sniff. "The bills she ran up. It was shocking. And this is why you've been advising your son Marcus to take this aggressive stance to protect him." "My son is too generous. He would have let her walk away with everything. I am merely protecting my family." "And you're also protecting Miss Chloe Vance?" Henderson asked, his voice still gentle. Beatrice smiled, a thin reptilian expression. "Chloe is a sweet, gentle girl who has been unfairly maligned by Irina's jealousy. She has been a great comfort to Marcus in this trying time. I've taken her under my wing, yes." "You've taken her under your wing," Henderson repeated. "You've had lunch with her, given her advice." "Of course. She is a victim in this." "A victim," Henderson said. He paused, walking back to his table. He picked up a single black portable hard drive. Irina's heart was in her throat. "Mrs. Davenport," Henderson said, his voice suddenly sharp, "what is your relationship with a Mr. Arthur Vance?" The change was instantaneous. Beatrice's smile didn't fade. It froze. It was like watching a statue crack. I don't know who that is." She lied, but her voice was a fraction too high. "You don't. You weren't at the Metropolitan Ball with him 2 years ago. You don't have bi-weekly dinners with him. You're not partners in a shell corporation called Aegean Holdings." Barlow shot to his feet. "Objection! This is irrelevant. Where is this going?" "It is going to the heart of this case, Your Honor," Henderson boomed. It is going to fraud, conspiracy, and criminal malfeasance. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Henderson, you are making an extraordinary claim. You had better be able to back it up. Objection overruled. Mrs. Davenport, answer the question. Beatrice was pale now, her knuckles white on the railing of the witness box. He is an acquaintance, a financial advisor. So, he is Mr. Graves. Beatrice's eyes widened. She was trapped. Henderson didn't wait for an answer. And is it not true, Mrs. Davenport, that Arthur Vance is Chloe Vance's father? In the gallery, Marcus let out a choked sound. He turned to look at Chloe. Chloe, who was no longer the picture of sympathy. She was staring at Henderson, her face a mask of pure terror. This is ridiculous, Beatrice spat. Irina has poisoned you with her lies. Irina hasn't said a word, Mrs. Davenport, Henderson said. But you have, you and Arthur, for years. Your Honor, we submit this hard drive marked Exhibit D. We found it in the defendant's sentimental safe password, Reginald. At the name of the poodle, Beatrice looked like she'd been shot. She lunged forward. That's private, you can't. We can. Henderson's voice filled the room. And on this drive we have the entire conspiracy. We have the Aegean Holdings Incorporation papers. We have the wire transfers from the Davenport Family Trust. We have the secret agreement between you, Arthur Vance, and your victim, Chloe Vance, to split your son's inheritance once you had successfully destroyed his wife. No? Marcus yelled from the gallery. Mother, no. And we have this, Henderson said, projecting an email onto the courtroom's main screen. It was from Beatrice's email account. To Chloe's. Subject, the dinner. You must be seen at the Gilded Sparrow on Tuesday. Make sure he orders the Veuve Clicquot. Irina's tracker is on his Range Rover. She will follow him. Be convincing. We need her to file the papers. Remember the agreement, 20%. The courtroom was silent. Marcus was sobbing openly. Chloe Vance had bolted for the door, but a bailiff stepped in her way. Beatrice. Beatrice was deflated. The queen was gone. In her place was a small, pale, and utterly defeated old woman. She stared at the email, then her gaze drifted, finding Irina. Irina had not moved. She didn't look triumphant. She didn't look angry. She just looked back, holding her gaze as Beatrice's entire world burned to the ground around her. Your Honor, Henderson said into the silence. We have more. Spreadsheets, further emails. A decade of systematic fraud. We also have a memo line on a wire transfer to Chloe Vance for $50,000 dated the day after Irina filed for divorce. It reads, Phase 1 complete. The judge slammed her gavel. Order in the court. She looked at Beatrice, then at the panic-stricken lawyer Barlow, who looked like he'd just swallowed acid. Mr. Henderson, the judge said, her voice ice. I am placing this drive and all its contents under seal to be delivered immediately to the district attorney's office. This is now a criminal matter. All divorce proceedings are stayed. Mrs. Davenport, you are not to leave this courtroom. She hit the gavel again. Bailiff, detain Mrs. Davenport. The aftermath was not a quiet ripple. It was a tidal wave that shattered the foundations of Willow Creek society. The moment Judge Miller slammed her gavel and uttered the words, Bailiff, detain Mrs. Davenport, the story exploded. Irina and Mr. Henderson were mobbed as they exited the family courtroom, a place of quiet proceedings now besieged by news vans. Microphones were shoved in Irina's face. Irina, is it true? A conspiracy? Mrs. Davenport, what did you know? Is the entire Davenport fortune a fraud? Henderson, a rock, put a hand on her back and steered her through the circus. My client has no comment. All future inquiries will be handled by the district attorney's office, which is now in possession of the Reginald files. That one word, Reginald, was all the press needed. The next day, the headlines were a brutal, delicious feast of schadenfreude. The Willow Creek Conspiracy. How a mother-in-law, a lover, and a mistress plotted to destroy a wife. The Reginald files dead poodle's password, unlocks a decade of fraud. Davenport dynasty in ruins. Beatrice Davenport, 65, arrested for embezzling millions from her own son. The scandal was so audacious, so salacious, that it dominated the news cycle for weeks. Beatrice, Arthur, and Chloe were instant tabloid villains. Irina was painted at first as the wronged wife, a tragic, sympathetic figure. But the immediate fallout was terrifying. Irina's business, Irina Designs, which ran on reputation and trust, was suddenly toxic by association. Aura Cosmetics, her flagship client, put her massive rebranding contract on indefinite pause, citing the moral turpitude clause in her contract. Other clients, fearing the stench of the scandal, pulled out. Irina, having poured her liquid assets into the legal fight, was suddenly facing her own financial cliff. For 2 agonizing months she was truly alone, her assets still frozen by the initial injunction, watching her life's work circle the drain. "This is the last battle," Henderson assured her as they prepared for the criminal trial, which was fast-tracked due to the overwhelming evidence. "This is where we break them, or they break us. Hold on." The criminal courtroom was larger, colder, and packed. This was no longer a private family matter. This was the people versus Davenport, Vance, and Vance. Irina sat in the front row directly behind the prosecution. The trial was a circus. The Reginald Drive was the star witness, its contents laid bare for the jury. But the real drama came from the co-conspirators turning on each other. Chloe Vance was the first to crack. In a desperate plea for leniency, she took the stand against Beatrice and her own father. Her performance was worthy of an Oscar. Dressed in a mousy brown sweater, her blonde hair pulled back, she wept. I was a victim too," she cried, sobbing into a tissue. "My father, he has a power over me. And Beatrice, she was so strong, so convincing. They forced me. They told me Marcus deserved to be free from his crazy wife. They scripted what I had to say, what I had to wear, even the perfume. I was terrified. I just did what they told me." The prosecutor let her cry, then in a cold, precise voice asked, "And the 20% consulting fee you were set to receive? Miss Vance, was that part of the terror?" Chloe's sobs hitched. That was my father's idea. I never saw a dime." Next was Beatrice. Her St. John suits were gone, replaced by ill-fitting state-provided attire. She too tried to pivot, painting herself as a lonely, seduced widow. "Arthur Vance is a devil," she whispered, her voice trembling with a new, weak theatricality. He preyed on me after my husband's death. He clouded my judgment. He was a Svengali, controlling my finances, my emotions. He was the one who despised Irina. He was the one who saw her as a threat. I was just protecting my son. I was protecting him from Arthur." She turned to the jury, her hands clasped. "I am a mother. What mother would not do anything to protect her child?" The prosecutor simply projected the Gilded Sparrow email onto the screen. "Make sure he orders the Veuve Clicquot. Irina's tracker is on his Range Rover. She will follow him." "Is this the email of a concerned mother, Mrs. Davenport?" the prosecutor asked. "Or the email of a stage director? Is this a woman protecting her son, or a woman pimping him out to destroy his wife for profit?" Beatrice recoiled, her mask of civility finally shattering into a snarl of pure hatred. You bitch," she shrieked, pointing not at the prosecutor but at Irina. "You did this. You ruined my family." The courtroom erupted. Finally there was Marcus. He wasn't on trial, but he was called as a material witness. He was a ghost. He shuffled to the stand, his eyes empty. The prosecution was brutal. "Mr. Davenport, are you telling this court that as a senior partner at Grant Thornton Advisory, you were unaware that your mother was siphoning millions of dollars from your own trust fund?" I don't handle the family accounts," Marcus mumbled. "Mother always, she handled everything. She handled your affair too, didn't she?" booked the restaurants, paid the mistress. I thought she was just helping me. I was unhappy. She was so cold. Cold, the prosecutor pounced. Or was she just at work, Mr. Davenport? At the job that was, as it turns out, funding your entire family's fraudulent enterprise. Marcus put his head in his hands and broke down sobbing. I don't know. I didn't know. I never know. It was the truest statement he'd ever made. Irina didn't give a victim impact statement. She didn't need to. When the verdict came in guilty on all counts, she simply watched. At the sentencing, the judge was scathing. He spoke of the arrogance of privilege, of the corrosion of greed. Beatrice Davenport was sentenced to 15 years in state prison. Arthur Vance, 15 years. Chloe Vance for her willing and greedy participation, but eventual if self-serving cooperation, received 5 years. Irina watched the bailiff cuff Beatrice. Their eyes met one last time. Beatrice's gaze was hollow, burned out by a fury so pure it had consumed her. Irina felt nothing. Not triumph, not anger. Just the cold, quiet click of a door finally blessedly locking. A week later, Irina was back in Mr. Henderson's office. He was beaming. The divorce is finalized, Irina. The judge granted it on grounds of... Well, he just gestured to the pile of criminal convictions. The prenup was not just set aside. It was, and I quote, incinerated as a monument to criminal fraud. Henderson slid a folder across the desk. And now the good part, the clawback. The state's forensic accountants were impressed by the Reginald files. They followed your breadcrumbs. They recovered almost everything from the offshore accounts. He ticked off the points. The Willow Creek house, which was marital property, is yours free and clear. The millions your business Aura wired to the joint account, which Beatrice then siphoned, it's been returned with penalties. And the judge was so appalled by the conspiracy he awarded you a significant punitive damage settlement levied directly against Beatrice's remaining and now unfrozen personal assets. You are, for lack of a better term, a very wealthy woman. Irina felt the tension of the last year drain from her shoulders. She hadn't just survived. She had won. That afternoon she got a call. It was the CEO of Aura Cosmetics. Irina, the woman said, her voice flush with embarrassment. I owe you an apology. We paused. We were scared. We were wrong. We just read the trial transcripts. Your strength, your integrity, your thoroughness. My God, Irina, that is what our brand is about. We're not just re-upping your contract, we're doubling it. And we want you to be the face of our new resilience campaign. We want your story. Irina's firm, Irina Designs, was reborn. It became simply Irina. Her brand was no longer just about minimalist luxury. It was about truth, resilience, and unshakable integrity. She became a symbol for women everywhere who had been underestimated. Clients, particularly wealthy, powerful women navigating their own treacherous divorces, lined up. She wasn't just a designer, she was a protector, a truth-teller, a woman who knew where all the hidden safes were. Irina went back to the Willow Creek house one last time. The marble was just as cold. The silence was just as loud. She walked through the rooms, a ghost in her own past. The smell of peonies was long gone, but the memory of it, sweet and cloying and false, still lingered. She went to the study. The safe was still there, its door hanging open, a dark, empty mouth. She didn't pack a single thing. She didn't want the Hermes blankets, the Restoration Hardware furniture, the Sub-Zero fridge. It was all part of the set, a stage for a play she never auditioned for. She made one call to a high-end estate liquidator. Sell it all, she said, every last spoon. Then I want the full proceeds wired directly to the Genesis Women's Shelter. She walked out the front door, placed her keys on the cold marble entry table, and never looked back. A year later, Irina was in her new office. It was a stunning penthouse studio overlooking the river, all warm reclaimed wood, lush green plants, and floor-to-ceiling windows. Her own vibrant abstract art hung on the walls. It was the complete opposite of the Davenport tomb. It was a space that was alive. Her assistant, Sarah, buzzed. "Ma'am, there's a Mr. Marcus Davenport here. He doesn't have an appointment. Frankly, he looks unwell." A jolt. Irina hadn't seen or heard from him since his breakdown on the witness stand. "Send him in, Sarah." The man who walked in was not Marcus Davenport's senior partner. He was a husk. He was thinner, his skin gray. His suit was a cheap, rumpled off-the-rack synthetic a size too big in the shoulders. His eyes were hollowed out. He stopped in the middle of the bright, airy room, stunned by the light, by the success by her. Irina was not the woman he'd left. She was standing by her drafting table wearing a vibrant Diane von Furstenberg wrap dress, her hair in a stylish, sharp bob. She was glowing, powerful. "Irina," he breathed. "This place, my God, you look incredible. What do you want, Marcus?" Her voice wasn't cold. It was neutral, finished. I just... He twisted a crumpled hat in his hands. "I'm working now at an H&R Block, in a cubicle. Can you believe it?" He tried to laugh. It was a desperate, wheezing sound. I'm living in a studio apartment in the valley. I'm very busy, Marcus." I know. He took a step closer. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I know I said it before. But Irina, I see it now. I see you. I was a fool. I was blind. She controlled me, Irina. My whole life. She twisted me up. Yes, she did, Irina said, turning to face him fully. And you let her. You were a grown man, Marcus. You had a choice every single day, and you chose her. You chose the lies because they were easier. He flinched. He moved closer, his eyes wet with a desperate New Age sincerity. He tried to take her hand. But I'm free of her now, and I'm in therapy. I'm doing the work. I see what I lost. Irina, please. I still love you. I know it doesn't mean much. But could we just get a coffee? Just to talk. I'm so alone. Irina pulled her hand away, not with anger, but with a weary finality. No, Marcus. His face twisted. The pathetic sad sack mask fell away, revealing the old, petulant, narcissistic boy underneath. No. Just no. After everything, I'm ruined, Irina. My life is over. My mother is in prison. My reputation is gone. And you're what? You're on the cover of Forbes. How is that fair? Irina almost laughed. Fair! She stood up and walked to the wall of windows, looking out over the city that was now hers. Fair was the truth, Marcus. You, your mother, Chloe Arthur. You all lived in a world of comfortable lies. You built a house of cards and you tried to build it on my back. What you're experiencing isn't unfair, it's gravity. The lies finally got too heavy and it all came crashing down. She turned back to him, her eyes clear and hard as diamonds. You are not sorry you betrayed me. You are sorry you are not rich anymore. You are sorry you got caught. You don't love me. You loved the idea of me the way I decorated your life. And then you loved the idea of Chloe the way she was a new, exciting secret. But the only person you've ever truly loved, Marcus, is your mother. And look where that got you. But what am I supposed to do? He wailed, a child lost in the woods. That, Irina said, is no longer my problem. Sarah will validate your parking. You should go, Marcus. He stared at her, waiting for the flicker of pity, the crack in her resolve. He found none. Defeated, he turned and shuffled out of her bright new life, the automatic glass door sliding shut behind him with a soft whoosh. Irina stood at the window for a long time. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant strokes of orange, pink, and defiant purple. Her phone buzzed. She looked down. A text from Nathan, the kind, brilliant architect she'd met at a gallery opening. Text, just saw the Forbes feature. Incredible. They're right, you're a genius. Still on for 8. Irina smiled, a real warm smile that reached her eyes. She thought of the cold marble, the smell of peonies, the chilling silence of her old life. They were just static, a story she had already finished. She typed back, "On my way, and genius is a strong word. Let's stick with brilliant." She grabbed her Bottega Veneta briefcase, the one she had bought with her money, and walked out into the beautiful golden evening, completely and finally free. Irina's long nightmare was finally over. She walked out of that courtroom and later her office not as a victim, but as a victor who had reclaimed her life through her own strength and intelligence. The house, the money, that was just a bonus. Her real prize was her freedom. But the scars of betrayal, especially from a family, last a lifetime. What do you think? Was Beatrice's greed her ultimate downfall? Or was it her sheer arrogance? How do you think Marcus and Chloe will survive the fallout of their own deception? Do you think Marcus could ever truly be redeemed? Or was he, as Irina said, just a weak man from start to finish? We want to hear your take in the comments below. If you were captivated by Irina's incredible fight for justice, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs to see that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds a way out. And if you love stories of karma drama and the ultimate triumph of truth, make sure you subscribe to this channel and ring that notification bell. We release new real-life drama stories every week, and you do not want to miss what we have coming next. Thank you for listening.